I'm told to be close to the microphone when I speak. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening for our second exhibit program that is programs directly related to the Negro Motors Green Book exhibition. I hope you had a chance to see the exhibit before coming up. And if you did not make it all the way through or wasn't satisfied with the time you had, August 13th is the last day. So you have about a couple of months to come back. My name is Samuel W. Black. I am the director of the African American program here at the John Hines History Center and the lead curator for the Negro Motors Green Book. This evening's program, Crossroads of the World, that focuses on urban renewal in Pittsburgh and elsewhere, is going to give us an opportunity to further discuss not only the landscape that is illustrated in the Green Book exhibition, but also in that last portion of that exhibit, that last gallery, to talk about what happened to that landscape and where we are today. In addition to our panelists who will be introduced shortly, if you do need, we have the ALS interpreter here at the front foot of the stage to give sign language interpretation of this evening's program. I do want to now introduce our moderator for the panel. Her name is Jasmine Green. She is the Director of Education with One Hood Media, whose mission is to build liberated communities through art, education, and social justice. Jasmine is working to provide arts education, media literacy, and professional development skills to artists within the Pittsburgh community with a focus on Black youth. She is also a visual artist and poet from east of Pittsburgh, going by the name Black Girls Absolute. So you may have seen her work or know of her work. In her work, Jasmine focuses on the rehumanization of Black women and girls, reminding them of their inherent worth in a world unwilling to recognize it. She has a BA in social sciences from the University of Pittsburgh. She's done art residencies at Boom Averse, artist residency at Boom Concepts on Penn Avenue is that Garfield? Yeah. In the Garfield community. The Pittsburgh Foundation, Exposure Arts at the Tongue River Artist Residency in Dayton, Wyoming, and Activation Residency where Stars and Bodies Collide in Woodridge, New York. She's done talks and panels before with the YWCA Action Conversations about Race in 2023 here in Pittsburgh, the Pennsylvania Governor's Roundtable on Black Mental Health, that was in Harrisburg, and Women's Leadership and Mentorship Program, 7th Annual Women and Transformational Leadership Symposium, telling BIPOC, BIPOC, stories in Pittsburgh, and that was in Moon, Pennsylvania, Moon Township. So please welcome our moderator for this evening, who will introduce our panelists, Ms. Jasmine Green.
Well, just because you're a little taller. Right, so thank you for that lovely introduction, Director Black. It is greatly appreciated. Again, my name is Jasmine Green, and I have the incredible honor of moderating tonight's panel on behalf of my colleague, Miracle Jones Esquire, who could not join us this evening. I would also like to take this opportunity to introduce Allison, who's going to be our ASL interpreter for this today's program. For the next 2 hours, we will be discussing the impacts of urban renewal and gentrification, utilizing the Pittsburgh region as a microcosm of a national strategy of Black displacement and disenfranchisement. Our first speaker, Dr. Bonnie Young, is going to center us in this program by giving us a 25-minute synopsis of the history of urban renewal and eminent domain. Bonnie Young is a native of Pittsburgh's Hill District and a faculty member at California University of Pennsylvania in the Department of Health and Human Services. Dr. Young is an accomplished educator and scholar with more than 17 years experience in college-level teaching. She holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from Edinburgh University of Pennsylvania, an MSW with a concentration in community health and mental health from West Virginia University, and a doctorate in social work from Virginia Commonwealth University. Dr. Young's scholarship is focused on community practice with particular attention to social and economic justice. Dr. Young has more than 25 years of experience in macro community practice, much of which was with the Hill District Consensus Group. As a community advocate, she has focused on working to gather data and perspectives from community residents and service providers on what they believe represents fair and just community development. Her research helped to build the case for Pittsburgh Civilian Review of Policing and Local Community Anti-Displacement Strategies. She helped to form a community advisory board to inform the work of the Allegheny Public Health Department in developing a public health response to community violence in Pittsburgh. She has engaged community members and professional colleagues in neighborhood transformation efforts, ranging from developing community benefits agreements to community-driven master planning and neighborhood-level development project review. Dr. Young has helped secure significant funding to implement community change projects in the Hill District. As a member of Pittsburgh Mayor Bill Peduto's transition team, Dr. Young helped to create policy recommendations to ensure resident-driven decision-making on given numerous conference presentations on her work. And she has consulted with organizations in Houston, Texas, and Tulsa, Oklahoma on strategies for equitable community development. Welcome, Dr. Bonnie Young.
Thank you very much. And I have to start by saying that 25 years of the experience that I gained was under the tutelage. It began under the tutelage of Mr. Redwood, who's kind of my mentor in troublemaking, and we'll see the connection as we continue to talk. So yes, we're going to talk a little bit about displacement in Pittsburgh's Hill District, and then we're going to switch and talk about some current efforts at the end in terms of what it is that people are doing to correct the problem. I am a social worker, and as a social worker, we always try to, of course, identify what the challenges are, but we also try to identify what the strengths are that we can build upon. So Pittsburgh's Hill District, in terms of strengths, has a wonderful location. Many people in this room, I imagine, are familiar with the Hill District. It's got great views of the city. It's got great connection to downtown, and also close to the Education and Medical Center in Oakland. However, the Hill District has faced significant challenges as a result of redlining, and we're going to talk about a formal definition of what that is. But generally, it is a process of disinvestment and disregard, really, for low-income people of color all across the country. The Crossroads of the World theme comes about and came from the work of Claude McKay, a Harlem Renaissance poet. Upon having come here and experienced some of the great artistic work that was going on during the Harlem Renaissance with jazz, so on and so forth. However, the first African Americans kind of came to Pittsburgh through General John Forbes' army. We had our wonderful Fort Pitt, which people will probably know about. African Americans were not welcome, even though they were British soldiers technically in the Revolutionary War. They were not welcome in the fort. And so they were left to fend for themselves in what we now know as the Hill District, and so that they could have a place to kind of be somewhat safe from the indigenous people who rightly wanted to have the use of their land. As we said before, the Hill District is a center for jazz, a center for culture. It was also a center for abolition, a center for institution building. Reverend Snyder is going to talk about what we know as Mother Bethel Church, Big Bethel Church, which was a major center for history and culture, abolition, and even the creation of the first educational institution for African Americans west of the Alleghenies. Throughout the 1930s and through the 50s, the Hill District was just really a great delight. We have some folks who are in this room who lived in the area that was later demolished and who have firsthand experience, and they may choose to say something at some point if they like. And we also, the stories of the Hill were so powerful that August Wilson, a well-known playwright, wrote about a lot of what happened, and his stories are so compelling that they continue to be produced in movies and other art forms today. However, despite the Hill District being a center for culture, a center for institution building, power building, even for African Americans in the city and in the region, it really did not matter when the city decided that there needed to be a new home, cultural home for the Civic Light Opera, and decided that the perfect place for that to be located was in the Lower Hill. As a result of that work, to relocate to create that center of culture in the Lower Hill, 1,300 buildings were demolished, 13 businesses, and over 8,000 residents were forced to relocate. And the Hill District lost its commercial core and much of its population, and was left disconnected from economic opportunities. And as again, Reverend Snyder will talk about, the Mother Bethel, that very powerful historic institution, was actually demolished right along with everything else. The process of deciding that the land, one of the reasons that that land in the Lower Hill was decided upon as a location for the new arena, was this idea of urban renewal. Like, we have these areas of the city that we consider to be dilapidated, that are poorly kept, so on and so forth, resulted from that process. That thinking came about through a process called redlining, right? It existed as a practice for quite some time, but it started to become codified in the 1930s when the Roosevelt administration sent out folks to centers of urban population all across the country in preparation to create a home loan program to help to revitalize communities as part of the New Deal. These surveyors, for lack of a better word, these folks who went and looked at these communities, looked at the quality of the communities, and they graded the communities and they gave them a color. And that color was related to desirability. And the way that the process went essentially was that communities graded as best were considered green communities. Communities that were considered still desirable were blue, and communities considered to be less optimal were considered definitely declining or yellow, and red communities were considered to be hazardous. And according to the University of Richmond's study of the documents that helped to create the Home Owners Loan Corporation, which was the precursor to our modern day FHA, the main yardstick or the main decision maker as to the grading of a particular community had a lot to do with the number of Negroes and undesirables infiltrating a neighborhood. And those folks come directly from the document that looked at those original writings as these surveyors went out and assessed communities. And what should be noted is that as communities were graded, the presence of Negroes was particularly problematic. However, the concentration of any population that was not Anglo-Saxon Protestant was actually helped to contribute to the grading of community as less than optimal. The past redlining that occurred has present day implications. A lot of times when it comes to African-American communities talking about their experiences and kind of what has happened, folks say, oh, that was the past, that doesn't have any relevance for today. Well, it still has relevance because that lack of investment, right? So redlining functions such that banks would not loan. If they would loan at very high interest rates. Insurance companies would not insure. If they did insure, they would insure with very high premiums. And that was of properties, regardless of the color, so to speak, or the race of the homeowner, it was simply about the location. So whether or not you were Italian or Jewish or Polish or African-American, if you were in one of these redlined hazardous communities with a high concentration of undesirables, you could not get investment to improve your properties. As a result, folks who were able to kind of escape or continuing or ongoing or escalating kind of decay that happened in the communities, those who were able to escape and go other places did, right? And then for other populations that because of segregation or because of economics were not able to leave, had to continue to kind of try to function and make a way out of no way in their neighborhoods. And this is according to the Center for Investigative Research in terms of looking at what the present day implications of these of redlining is. That disinvestment we can see to the present day when you don't have a house with a lot of value that hasn't had a lot of remodeling, then the house becomes cheap property, and cheap property becomes subject to speculation. And Mr. Redwood is going to talk a little bit about some of the corporations that are now taking advantage of that. I know how many people have seen a "We Buy Ugly Houses" sign, right? So you might say, "Oh, wow, that's so great! You know, you can sell your house in any condition." It's actually not good because it creates a problem with people who now might be able to access some credit, being able to access houses that are affordable and being able to renovate those houses for their own purposes. They are competing now with corporations, which is part of the problem with housing values being out of control. So those old practices aggravate current displacement. For example, the city of Pittsburgh lost nearly 10,000 Black residents from 2010 to 2020. And that's according to Public Source. And the Hill District, according to the Greater Hill District Master Plan Update, lost 200 Black homeowners in the Hill District per census tract in the Hill. And the Hill is composed of 12 census tracts for 2,400. That's 2,400 homeowners lost between 2010 and 2020. The challenge faced by the Hill District today is that disinvestment helped to contribute to the fact that only 30% of the homes in the Hill are owner occupied. And of those that are owner occupied, some are tax delinquent, they're in poor condition, and or they may have without clear legal title, right? So I'm saying these things, and I want to again back up being my strength-based social worker self and say that regardless of that, people have found a way. I think of Miss Brenda. I'm gonna point Miss Brenda. Miss Brenda, if you ever go past her house has always very vibrant color and beautiful outside. People have found a way. I'm not talking about her economic position, but nevertheless, I'm just saying that people find a way to make beauty even when they can't access the financial products that may be available to everyone else. People develop skill sets to be able to keep their homes in good condition as best they can. And so there are many people in the Hill District who found a way, they've made a way out of no way in the Hill District. The challenge is that the median income in the Hill District is $18,000 a year. And 1/2 of all renters and 1/4 of all homeowners already pay more than 30% of their incomes on housing. And for those of you who may know housing, you know that that's a major indicator of potential for economic vulnerability and instability when you pay more than 30% of your income in housing costs, whether it be rent or a mortgage. Again, these make residents vulnerable to the displacement that we talked about with the loss of so many Black Pittsburgh residents and residents in the Hill District overall. Here we have depicted Mrs. Thelma Lovett, a longtime activist in the Hill and Pittsburgh civil rights movement. She passed away in 2014, but this article is written about her in 2012. She was a more moderately income person in the Hill, but nevertheless, despite all of her activism and her relatively helpful set of resources, she actually was also displaced from her home, no longer able to afford the rent and needing to move with family, actually to Arizona. So the challenge, what's going on right now? What do we need to do? How do we correct this problem? When you look at predominantly African-American communities across the country, one of the key problems that people, some of the key problems that urban African-American communities that have been disinvested, a lot of the problems that you see there, people decide are the result of the problems of people, if these people would only get themselves together. And they don't necessarily recognize the historic policymaking that helped to create the current circumstances that people have had to adapt to in whatever ways made sense or were accessible to them. That's important to talk about as well. And so there are a number of things that can be done to correct the problem. And one of those things is to create actually for every city anti-displacement strategies, purposeful efforts, policymaking efforts to actually correct the problem and create space for people with low and moderate incomes in urban African-American, otherwise disinvested communities. It is also important, and for each of these areas, I've got like way more detail in terms of slides, but I was told to keep my slides to 10, and I think I might be on 10. So if folks have questions, I can give you more time. And I timed my presentation too, so it would be within the time frame, and I think I'm getting close to it. So I'm gonna go over these, not in a whole lot of detail, but there is more information in the slide should you desire to have. So the other thing is resident engagement and control over revitalization efforts. Some people say things like nothing for us without us. There are other catchphrases that folks say. The UN talks about something in the so-called developing world, pro-poor planning. So basically, if you are going to revitalize a slum area internationally, you would not sit in the financial center of that particular city or country and decide what needs to happen. You would go into the slums, talk to people about what it is that they need, that they want, what their resources, what their strengths are, and you would plan around what already exists. And so having residents actually have control over the developers that come in and what they decide to build and what the levels of affordability are, which is completely possible, right, is very, very important. I will also say something about CDCs, community development corporations all throughout the country are critical with making resident engagement, resident involvement in community development happen. But those CDCs also have to be resident controlled. They also have to have accountability and democracy when it comes to resident involvement. And folks like Derek Hedra and Mary Patia McCoy have studied CDCs and looked at when you have a CDC with very isolated control, very, very isolated community involvement, it helps to actually contribute to gentrification and disinvestment and other types of problems. Another key strategy is inclusionary zoning. Inclusionary zoning, I'm gonna go down, I'm just gonna go through. You can't really see this totally, but inclusionary zoning basically mandates that when housing is built, particularly if there is the allocation of public land for the building of housing, or the investment of public dollars for a particular development, that a certain percentage of housing be made available at affordable, or even at this point, moderate income folks need help as well, right? But particularly there's a focus on making a percentage of housing available to low and very low income people. And as you see, the main thing that can't really see the writing, but the main thing that I was trying to get folks to pay attention to is that across the country, there are variations in the percentages that people have found appropriate. Here in Pittsburgh, the Hill District Consensus Group has really advocated for 30%, and people go, oh my, what, right? But that actually would help to bring some of the folks back who have lost their housing over time. So I think with that, I am going to end. There's other stuff like tenant ownership, housing subsidies for folks to actually repair their homes, helping people to untangle the titles related to their homes. There are a lot of very complicated but simple strategies to correct the problems that are the legacy of redlining. I thank you for your time.
Thank you again, Dr. Young. Now that we have the history of urban renewal, let's learn about what it means to be impacted by urban renewal and fight to get ownership back into the community. Our next speaker who will be leading our next 25-minute segment will be Reverend Dr. Dale B. Snyder, Sr. Reverend Dr. Dale B. Snyder, Sr. has 28 years of pastoral experience and has served at Bethel AME Church in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania since November 2019. He is a veteran of the U.S. Army. He has graduated from David Myers University with a Bachelor of Science in Corporate Management and a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration. He also received a degree in Black Church Studies from the Ashland Theological Seminary, a Master of Divinity, and a Doctor of Ministry degree from Payne Theological Seminary. He has been bivocational for over 30 years, owning various businesses and managing government agencies. In 2012, he received the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Humanitarian Award presented by the Columbus Education Association for his work to defeat Issue 5, the collective bargaining bill in the state of Ohio. The past 2 years, he has led the fight for restorative justice for Bethel AME Church to get its historic land and church back, which has been taken by eminent domain in the 1950s. In 2022, he presented 2 workshops on Bethel's reparations in Germany at the World Council of Churches, which represents 550 million Christians from around the world. He has built alliances with the Pennsylvania Council of Churches and various ecumenical associations in the city of Pittsburgh. He has presented table talks about Bethel's reparations to 7 white congregations who've become allies in Bethel's fight for reparations. The Penguins have made the historic announcement to give Bethel 1.5 acres of land in the Lower Hill. He has hosted Get Out the Vote, voter registration, phone banking, texting, and community voter education forums at Bethel. He serves on the board of Minority Brand, which manages Bounce TV Columbus, Ohio, and is the current president of the Hill District Ministerial Alliance. He also serves as the executive director of Bethel Trinity CDC. He is married to Carmelita Snyder. Welcome, Reverend Dr. Dale B. Snyder, Sr.
Thank you for that kind introduction. And I thank Dr. Black for this opportunity to come and put together this wonderful presentation, and Hines and everyone else who has been involved. I am honored to be here to talk about Bethel and the story of Bethel. And if you have an opportunity, please walk by and see the exhibits to my right. They tell a story about what happened to our congregation. This here talks about eminent domain. This was an appraisal done on Bethel AME Church in 1955, showing that the replacement cost of Bethel was $740,627.75. They depreciated the value of replacement costs and said that the depreciated value of our church was $460,247. Bethel only received $240,000 when they knew the replacement cost was $745,000. Eminent domain was used in the state of Pittsburgh. City of Pennsylvania, state of Pennsylvania, was the first time that eminent domain was used across the country. There was laws in place that said you couldn't take churches and cemeteries by eminent domain. But somehow the city of Pittsburgh created the URA, which was able to work their way around that state charter, the state law. And as a result, this was a letter written from our bishop back in 1956. And in that letter, he stated their first offer to us was only $168,000 when they already had in their possession that our church to be replaced would cost $745,000. Bishop said that the counter offer that it would, from his experience and people who are advising him, it would take almost $500,000 to replace Bethel. This is a letter, they appealed it, and this is a letter down in Philadelphia where the urban renewal administration came up with a letter in December the 27th, 1957. And this states that the owners of the above subject parcel has tentatively agreed to sell the Bethel property and to sell the property for a consideration of $240,000, which exceeds the highest approved appraisal by $52,000. Understanding what white supremacy is all about and understanding how it affected the Black community. Our congregation started in 1808. They heard the rumblings of what happened in Philadelphia with Richard Allen, and they sent a messenger down to receive a pastor from the new founded African Methodist Episcopal Church, which came out of a group called the Free African Society. Bethel AME Church had been fighting for the liberation of African people, not African American, but African people ever since their founding. They're called Africans because that's what we were in the 1700s. It was not a new kind of cliche that we have taken on as a people. We've been colored, Black, Negro, you just name it. We had all kinds of names, and we still, to this very day, have a struggle figuring out who we are. So Bethel had a lot of firsts. We opened up the first school to educate Black people in 1831, when it was illegal for Black students to go to school with white children. We had the first statewide convention on civil engagement in 1872. So, 1841. We had a whole lot of firsts over this period. So when I came to this church 3 years ago, right before the pandemic hit, one of my greatest joys that I knew that from the seminary that I graduated from in our fourth general conference, a resolution to start Payne Theological Seminary came out of Bethel AME Church. Bethel, along with Mother Bethel in Philadelphia, had fought for the elimination of slavery, had fought to get the African-American man the right to vote, fought to get the woman the right to vote. We have always been that activist church. We've always been bootstrappers, trying to find a way, no matter what the odds were against us, no matter what the country said, what the churches said, what everyone said, we believed in ourselves and we done whatever it was necessary to educate our people and to hope for a brighter and a better future. So this is Bethel in 1954, protesting police brutality. This is just the east wing of the church. The church had 4 wings, a balcony. The church was built by Black folks, for Black folks. They walked in 1908. They were a 3,000 vibrant congregation at that time. We had a nurses guild that was second to none in the community that would take care of all of the medical needs of our people who could not go to the regular hospital. And we're talking about going all the way back to the 1800s going forward. We own 16 houses that we're now trying to find out what period we purchased those houses, whether it was during the Great Migration or was it during the Underground Railroad. When they took our church, All of our records were displaced. They were placed in people's homes. We were homeless for 2 years, and we had no place to place our records. When we moved into our new building only held 900 members, and it was some mile and a half away from our historical site. And we moved into a neighborhood that was already foundational churches that have been there for decades. And we were trying to compete in a community which had been displaced. Of the 8,000 people that were displaced, 3,000 were members of our church. So now we move into a smaller building. You had to take several trolleys or trains or bus stops to get there. We were not a rich congregation. We were working people who came together and put their nickels, dimes, and quarters. And when people came up from the South and they seen Big Bethel, when they seen this citadel of hope built for Black people, it was a place that we can come and imagine a better day for our sons and our daughters, no matter what happened on the outside of the walls of this church, on the inside of the walls of the church. We believed that we was God, somebody, and we took the time to develop doctors. You know, a lot of us come to the future and we have all the young playwrights and artists, but one of the first doctors in the United States of America, Dr. Tanner's daughter, was one of the first known medical Black doctors in the country. His son was a great artist, and his artistry, I think they hold it here in the Hines Museum. We had so many firsts in Bethel. We were not the kind of church that sat idly by and not meet the needs of the community. We organized in the basics of voter registration, voter education. Most of our graduates graduated from Wilberforce University, which we still own today. Out of that resolution, the AME Church, as many of us don't really know, our connective history, at one point we owned 29 historical Black colleges. We still have colleges in South Africa. We just opened up a clinic that we have down in Haiti. We're probably the biggest secret in the African-American community that most people don't even realize who we are and what we do. Wilberforce is the oldest privately owned Black college or African-American college in the country. The resolution, when we couldn't go to college, we created our own college. When we couldn't go to their schools, we created our own schools. When we couldn't work in their businesses, we created our own business. So a lot of times they give a whole lot of history and a whole lot of credence to the jazz that happened in the Lower Hill and Upper Hill. But it was the Bethel's 3,000 members who patronized those businesses, who put the people in business, encouraged them from the time they were little kids all the way to the time they became an adult, that you should own and control your own destiny. And so I just got to add that story to what Bethel done for this neighborhood, because we have been kind of wiped out of the history of the value of having a 3,000 member congregation working on the exceptional behavior of our people. So this is our building, our Citadel of Hope that was torn down, taken against our will. Epiphany, which sits right across the street from Bethel. There's a picture of Epiphany down at the bottom when you come look at the exhibit. Epiphany is still standing there today. Epiphany got an exemption. Bethel did not get an exemption. If we had an attorney during that time to represent us equitably, we would still be standing in our historical spot. But we were taken because at that time, we could not meet in places like this to talk about justice. It was a different day in 1954, 1950s and the 30s. Even though we were a very progressive and a very dominating congregation, we was dealing against white supremacy and hatred, segregation and racism that exhibited itself and targeted this community that was doing great work. I mean, great work for not only Pittsburgh, but for this nation. Not only did they tear down our church and build an arena, eminent domain caused them to bring a highway system all the way through our neighborhood. And that highway system segregated us from downtown, which further created economic demise for the community. You can see that our community at that time was not a blight. It was a vibrant community with people who were in e-commerce. They would work together. It was towards 1950 was almost a predominantly Black community, but some of our historical records show that it was a mixed community. It was a crossroads of America. This shows that even after they tore down our church, tore down our community, and they built the civic arena, we couldn't even get jobs to work at the civic arena to build it or whatever. It's not, I don't think it's called a civic arena. I call it the big silver dome, but I'm not from here. But, they said they want jobs. We want to work. They put a sign that says, "Attention City Hall, URA," which took our land, took our church. No more development beyond this point. We demand low-income housing for the Lower Hill. The Lower Hill was a densely populated neighborhood that they took 95 acres of land and displaced all the people, all the businesses to build what I call a playground for white people to come and entertain themselves. This is a map of the Upper Hill, Middle Hill. All of the yellow and the blue that you see are properties that is owned by the city and the URA. They are the biggest slumlords in our community. This has been a decades of disinvestment, of buying properties, waiting on people to get delinquent in their property so they can take ownership and wait for gentrification to happen. At the last administration, we worked with them tirelessly. We built an alliance of individuals, and we asked the former mayor to give us a map, which they were going to give us all the land around our church. Where you see the big B is at, that's where Bethel is currently located at. The number one was where we want to do our first housing home ownership program. And they asked us at that time what properties we wanted as part of our reparations, as far as restorative justice. And we were up and moving. And as you know, we have the blue is owned by the URA, and the yellow spots are owned by the city of Pittsburgh, okay? So in order to get reparations or restorative justice, I knew that me by myself, hollering with my pulpit mic, I had to build an army. And so anytime I come to a church as a pastor, I ask my ministerial staff, had God given you any visions? Has God shown you anything that we should be doing as a congregation? And one of my ministers, stand up, Reverend Harris, she is a member of Bethel, and she grew up in Big Bethel, and her family was displaced and hurt by the movement of Bethel. And I'll give her an opportunity to say something in a minute about how it felt and how her parents felt about them taking Big Bethel. Big Bethel was the last building torn down during this demise. It was an island, and only two things was standing was Epiphany and Bethel. And members, our historian, she told me the story how they used to walk by Big Bethel, praying that God would save their church, praying that God will save their citadel of hope. And the bulldozers came and the cranes came, and it took the life out of this community. And our community has never been the same since. So I found a book. I was looking, this would happen, Bishop Crossroads from the Lutheran Church. The Lutherans had given a decree, a national decree, because of the Emmanuel 9, the person who went down to Charleston and killed 9 Black people at one of our sister churches during Bible study was a Lutheran, and they made a national declaration that they would build a relationship with African-American churches, primarily AMEs. So Bishop Crossroads reached out to our bishop, which reached out to me, and we was up, me and several AMEs and some of the people from the Lutheran church. We was walking around like little puppies trying to figure out what we're going to do, how we're going to make this relationship work. And then I got a letter from my bishop that was sent to us saying that Bethel deserved reparations. I didn't know what Bethel owned at that time or owed. And so we met with the person. They said, well, Pastor Snyder, you guys deserve reparations. I said, okay, so what does reparations look like to you since you say we deserve it? And that person said to me, oh, we'll put a plaque in the building, in the hallway where your church once stood. And I told that person, I said, listen, don't you speak for Bethel anymore. I want you to go back and tell the people who sent you to give us a few months and let us research, and we will begin to speak for ourselves. So at that point, I went to my colleagues who were trying to find something to do. I said, I got a project. And I began to pray, because what God has shown Reverend Holt, that we were going to get our land back, that we were going to get our development rights back. And a few weeks after I had talked to Reverend Holt, I said, well, write the vision, and she wrote the vision. And after she wrote the vision, I read the vision, I prayed over it, and then I got a dream about the vision, and God told me to go full speed ahead. And I've been doing that ever since. So I organize. I'm an organizer by trade. So I was looking for a biblical construct in order to try to figure out how I can get the Christian church to join in this campaign. And I was thinking about the year of Jubilee. Every 50 years in the Jewish tradition, they would give the land back to the original owners. That was part of it. So I was looking for that, and I began to research. And then I found this book called Reparations, a Christian Call for Repentance and Repair. And at that point, with the congregations, we started meeting every Thursday. That's where I met Carl Redwood. I invited him to come to our Thursday meetings. We've been meeting every Thursday or every other Thursday for the last almost 3 years. I try to organize everyone in the community to come around and tell our stories and try to find resolution. So on June 19th, this was 2 years ago, we met down on our historic property. We were going to protest the Penguins game because we thought that they owned the land at that time. And then they gave me a call and said, Pastor Snyder, we want to meet with you. And so they came into our sanctuary. I had my guns loaded. I'm ready for a boxing match. You know, then the Penguins said, no, Pastor Snyder, we believe in reparations. I said, okay, well, if you believe in reparations, I'm an old civil rights activist. You're gonna have to put what you say in writing. So they wrote an MOU, a memorandum of understanding about what they would do for us for reparations. So they came to the table, then we began to meet with the city, then we began to organize. And I had some great members of my church who have done some historic stuff in this city on many boards. And I said, listen, what happened? Come to find out that they were new members of Bethel. All they knew is the new Bethel from 60 years ago. Because when we came to our new church, we were in survival mode. We were trying to pay the light bill. We had to take out a mortgage to put in the air condition. When we finally got the air condition paid off, then we had to figure out how we was going to survive, how we're going to pay the property taxes on these 16 properties that we end up losing because we lost 2/3 of our congregation, which means we lost 2/3 of our income. So this 60-year period has been a nightmare for us. We asked them to find us some downtown property when they took our property, but the city and the URA said, if you pay us, we'll help you find downtown property. So we ended up not downtown. We ended up on top of the hill. We had always been a downtown church. There's our historical marker that I showed you that's over there is down on Cherry Street where our first church was located at. So this is another picture of our allies who we started to assemble. I want to thank Bishop Perserow and all of the pastors who came to our aid, my daughter Amber and Reverend Harris and my wife Carmelita and so many of us who organized. And when we looked at the book Reparations, we said, okay, how are we going to tell these white people that they owe us reparations and they don't run out the room? So what we did, we looked at the book and we modified the book into what we call table talks. And we began to educate the white church as their role and their responsibility in eminent domain and white supremacy. And what did the church do while all of these horrendous things was happening to Black people? So we started reparations. Pittsburgh talks about repentance and reconciliations. These are allied churches and organizations in which I was able to present to, along with Reverend Harris, Reverend Holt, Reverend Carmichael, Reverend Aaron. So it would be me and 2 white pastors and Reverend Holt and Aaron. We would present to these congregations and it would take us about 35 to 40 to an hour and a half, all depends on, you know, the congregation, what they wanted to input in. But all of these people came, our allies. You know, I want to really recognize them for their contribution because you have to build an army in order to bring about change. You have to educate people about what has happened to you so they can become your allies to go in rooms that you cannot go into. So after we organized them, this is what we taught them what happened about slavery and the role that the church played. Many of the institutions, the churches, they went and looked in their archives records. They could not find not one op-ed, not one piece of information saying that they were opposed to eminent domain. They were silent. They were silent as they took this 95 acres of land and displaced all these people and moved them outside of Allegheny County. This is a memoration doctrine orally in questions and answer format. This is from the book Reparations, written by Quan Duke and Gregory Thompson. Listen, consider the following excerpt from the Episcopal Slave Catechism used in Charleston, South Carolina. Who gave you a master and a mistress? God gave them to me. Now this, if you all, how many of you ever know what a catechism is? Anybody know what how many of y'all know what a litany is? Everybody know what a litany is? How many of y'all know what call and response is? You know, so y'all might know call and response. Okay, this was given to slave children for over 100 years. The Christian church owned slaves for over 100 years, separated mothers and fathers, didn't have to pay tithes and offerings because of the productivity of slavery. This is what they taught the children and the adults. Who says that you have to obey them? God says, I must. What book tells you all these things? The Bible. What does God say about your work? He that work shall not eat. Did Adam and Eve have to work? Yes, they were to keep the garden. Was it hard to keep that garden? No, it was easy. What makes the crop so hard to grow? Sin makes it. What makes you lazy? My own wicked heart. Yes. Oh, okay. How much time I got left? Because I thought forever.
2 minutes.
2 minutes? All right. Y'all didn't tell me I had 25 minutes. I just told you I ain't even coming. Because you can't tell 214 years in 25 minutes, but I'll do my best. So I just want to go to this point to give you some history. Abolitionist minister, educator John Free estimated that the minister of the gospel and members of the Protestant church owned a total of 660,000 slaves, whose total market value amounted to about $260 million. Adjusted for inflation, the sum is equivalent to about $8 billion today. So I want you to know that your citadels of hope, your churches, your seminaries, Brown University, Harvard, Yale, all were built on the back of slavery. So we use two Christian constructs to help current Christians who saying, Pastor, I didn't cause you any problems. Well, as a Christian, we use what is called the wicked tax collector. I remember the small as a kid climbed up in the tree to see Jesus. And people were mad at Jesus because he went with this person who was from the Hill District that sold drugs and whatever, had a notorious reputation. But salvation came to the tax collector. And he said, if I've stolen from anybody, I will replace it 4 times the amount that I've stolen. Then we use the Good Samaritan. Because a man came through the Hill District and it's in the white neighborhood, and they robbed a Black man, left him on the side of the road, tore off all his clothes. The rabbi walked by on one side, the priest walked by on the other side. But the Good Samaritan came and picked the man up, took him down to Penn Hotel, paid his bill, said, I'm going to Philadelphia, and here's a wad of money. When I come back, if there's anything is owed to repair this person, I'll pay it. So we ask the Christian churches, you may not directly cause the injury to us, but you see us injured on the side of the road. And if you are a Christian, it's your responsibility to come to our aid and to help us fight to get our land back that was taken against our will, was taken by white supremacists, and we ask you to help us to restore what was stolen from us. So they came, to make a long story short, this is what has happened. Our plan is to build 380 units of affordable housing, starting at 30% AMI, 60% AMI, and 80% AMI. And then our goal is to, once you get to the 80% AMI, if you transition all the way up, is to go right into home ownership. I need your help. I need your support. There's not a lack of funding in Pittsburgh. There's $24 billion in nonprofit and philanthropic money, $24 billion in 4,000 philanthropic organizations. There's 1,000 vacant lots in our neighborhood. So there's money, there's land, there's opportunity. What we need from Bethel on our nonprofit side is helping with social services that we can now organize. We need staffing so that we can find the best models from across the country to solve African-American problems. We're going to have a state-of-the-art daycare where we're going to teach children to read and to write. We're going to have after school, before school in our building So we're going to make sure those kids that are behind can catch up. We're going to have adult education. What I need is wraparound services for people who are already doing it in the community. And I bet, now if you say you can, if you say you got 4 mouses in your house, I'll come over and look at it, make sure you have whatever you have over there, because I'm not going to send my people to you if you're not doing what you can do. We're looking to build a model, an ecosystem for success. You may come in broke, busted, and disgusted, but by the time you leave through our system, we're going to take the least of them and make the best of them. So we need your support, Black, white, tall, gay, straight, whatever. If you got opportunity, you can open up some windows. We need help with the philanthropic community. We tried to hire 5 grant writing companies in the last 2 months. And all 5 said they don't have the capacity to take us on to help fund our nonprofit. $24 billion. Now, I'm not blaming the nonprofit community. These are I call the gatekeepers who are supposed to help us put the proposal together. So if you know someone who knows someone who knows someone who want to help us with this vision, come join Bethel, come join, put your shoulder to the wheel. We meet, we organize, and we solve problems. So I need y'all to come help us solve some problems. And that way, our children's children can look at all of us and say, hey, we took our lemons and we made lemonade. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
All right. Thank you again, Reverend Snyder. And so in the last hour, we have learned the history of urban renewal and have seen a case study through Bethel and me of what reclamation can look like. But how can we organize and assist these efforts now amidst robust gentrification and development? Carl Redwood joins us now for our final 25-minute presentation to discuss. Carl Redwood Jr. is a social worker and has participated in various community organizing efforts on the local, national, and international levels. He has been a part-time faculty member at the University of Pittsburgh School of Social Work for many years. Carl was a union organizer for faculty unionization at Pittsburgh University as part of the Academic Workers Association of the Steelworkers. Carl serves on the board of Pittsburgh United, a coalition of community, labor, faith, and environmental organizations committed to advancing the vision of a community and economy that work for all people. He is also a board member of the Abolitionist Law Center, a public interest law firm inspired by the struggle of political and politicized prisoners and organized for the purpose of abolishing class and race-based mass incarceration in the United States. Carl currently serves as the project director of the Pittsburgh Black Worker Center. Welcome, Carl Redwood Jr.
The rent is too damn high. As Bonnie said, between 2010 and 2020, we lost 10,000 Black residents from the city of Pittsburgh. During that same time frame, we lost 2,000 Black residents from the city of Wilkinsburg. Part of what's going on in our communities, not just even here in Western Pennsylvania, but around the country, is those communities that were redlined in the 40s and 50s and 60s are now the hot neighborhoods that are being flipped by developers. The URA of Pittsburgh, the Urban Redevelopment Authority, they have an investment plan. And how they work their investment plan, and other developers do too, is they look at home sale prices. And they look for a line where on one side of the line, the home sale prices are here, and on the other side of the line, the home sale prices are much lower. And they invest on that low side, because that's where you can make more money by flipping those properties, buying them cheap and selling them dear, or buying them cheap and jacking up the rents. And one way that works in Pittsburgh, it goes along the busway, particularly in Homewood. On one side of the busway in Homewood, the sale prices are low. And on the other side, which we call Point Breeze, the home sales are larger. So the low side is that low side of the investment line on the Homewood side of the busway. That same line runs through East Liberty. And then it's not the busway, but there's a line between Garfield and Friendship and Bloomfield where you have that same dynamic taking place. And those investment policies are well known to developers. That's what they do. For us, we'll say there's a crisis in housing, but for the developers, it's business as usual. Buy cheap and sell dear, jack up rents as much as you can when people leave. And the problem is we don't have any policies, like Bonnie was saying, that help to govern what happens in terms of housing. We could use policies like rent control. Some cities have rent control where landlords can only raise the rent a certain percentage every year. Other places use tools like community land trusts. That's where the land underneath your house, you don't own it.
Mhm.
You may own the house, but you don't own the land. And when you sell your house, you can only, your profit can only be so much. It's limited because you don't own the land and there's a covenant in the land. Now, that's not a benefit for those of us who think we're going to make a lot of money and wealth built through our homes. But it is a benefit for those first-time home buyers who can't afford to get into a home because it costs too much. But in the community land trust property, they're able to get in there and leave with some equity in their home, but they can't make a killing. Right now, there's a community land trust in Oakland. Garfield has a community land trust. There's a City of Bridges community land trust that works in various neighborhoods. But it's kind of a new thing in the Pittsburgh area, the community land trust model. But it's a model we really need to explore. The other model that we're exploring is not just the community land trust where the key to the community land trust is the land is in common ownership for 99 years. So that prevents the homeowner or the renter that's on top of the land trust from having exorbitant price increases when your lease expires or when your mortgage, when you're ready to move on to another mortgage. Your mortgage prices are lower too because you're not buying the land, you're just buying the house on top of the land. The other thing we're exploring right now is how to take those community land trusts and not just have regular home ownership on top, but to have cooperative home ownership on top. And the way the co-op works is sometimes it's called a limited equity co-op. And that's where the co-op owns your house and a lot of other houses in the neighborhood maybe. And when you leave, you can't sell it for whatever you want. It's governed by the cooperative agreement when you started out, sort of like some homeowners covenants that govern things that happen. We don't have any co-ops on top of community land trusts, but that's the next thing we really need to explore to try to preserve affordability in Pittsburgh. But we do have co-ops. One successful co-op is Belmar Gardens, which is located in the Lincoln-Lemington section in between Lincoln-Lemington and Homewood. It's a Black co-op that was formed in the 1940s and has existed since the 1940s with about 100 units. It's cooperatively owned. You buy into the co-op, you buy shares in the co-op. It's run by a board of members who live in the co-op, like every 3 or 4 buildings has a representative on the board, and they make the decisions on what happens with the property in the future. But those are two things to think about, community land trusts and co-ops. But the other thing to think about, this problem is not a Pittsburgh problem or a Southwestern Pennsylvania problem, it's a national problem. Because what really has happened is the solution for housing for low-income folks, which was public housing, doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
The plan was put in place to tear down public housing and turn the profits of public housing over to private corporations. And that was done in the Section 8 program that people heard of. They have a new fancy name for it. They call it housing choice. But, what it is basically, it's just a subsidy program. But the problem with that is the waiting list is so long. They opened up the waiting list for 5,000 new families in Pittsburgh. They got 12,000 applications. People are looking for low-income housing, but it doesn't exist. That's the real problem, and that's the problem we need to try to address, and it's a national problem. But housing is a basic need that people have, and we don't have enough. Reverend Snyder showed you the Freedom Corner billboard. We need low-income housing for the Lower Hill. That's still what we need. Nothing has changed. And as a matter of fact, the Pittsburgh Penguins, who received $750 million from you and me as subsidy, we built them a new arena. Plus, we gave them control of all the parking lots and all the land in the Lower Hill. And they're in the booth collecting all the parking money. The Penguins are owned by millionaires and billionaires. Ron Burkle, the main owner, is a billionaire. And we've given them $750 million in subsidy. And at different times, they've promised us housing. They had this one group from Denmark or somewhere called BIG, Burke Ingersoll or something. And they showed us all these nice pictures of the housing they were going to build in the hill.
Never happened.
Then the next thing we know, did nothing happen. And then they came back with another group, and it had some people from the neighborhood in it, some Black people that were going to build new housing for our neighborhood. And that didn't happen either. The only thing that we see is they're building this tall office building for First National Bank, and it's already up and built. And they've promised housing 2 or 3 times, but we've never seen the housing. And our main demand from the community is we want housing in the Lower Hill that's affordable for families from the Lower Hill or from the Hill District. And we really want housing that's affordable for families at 30% median income and below, or for low-income families. Our people are getting pushed out of the community, particularly from the formerly red line neighborhoods, and it's going on across the country because the rents are too damn high. But also another thing, in Allegheny County, 28% of all Black people live in poverty. That's double the poverty rate for white families. That's another contributing factor to the bigger problem that we face. But when you step back and look at it, we will say things are in crisis. But for the system, everything is working as intended. Because rich people are still making money, and they're making more money than ever because the system is really broken. And for me, with my radical self, the system, we got to name it, it's capitalism. It works for very rich people. It used to work for some people in the middle, particularly like when we had steel mill jobs and people were making money. But increasingly, it's not working for our families. People can't afford rent. They can't afford food, utilities. The cost of living is increasing, but your paycheck is not increasing in that same manner. But the profits of these big companies are greater than ever. Yeah. And it's a bigger problem than our local problem. But there are things we need to do locally: community land trust, rent control. We need public housing again. But really, the bigger problem can't really be solved locally. And we need to talk to other people in other places on how we move towards a bigger solution to this problem. And really, for housing, the solution is public housing. I know some of you, when you think about public housing, you say, oh, that's terrible. I wouldn't want to live there. When public housing was built in the Hill District, it was nice. People wanted to move in there. People who left the Lower Hill moved into public housing. Half all public housing in Pittsburgh was in the Hill. Aliquippa, Terrace Village #1, Terrace Village #2. Right now, we have 400 units of public housing left in the Hill in Bedford dwellings. And those folks are about to be displaced. And what we're trying to do in that case is to make sure instead of telling people, we'll give you a voucher and you can go wherever you want and maybe come back later, we're saying we need to have a policy of building first so that people can see where they're going to move to in the Hill District. And so people can only move once. But that's a policy we need to implement for the remaining 400 units in the Hill, build first, move once. But really, it's really important that we work around housing and understand the long trajectory of what we're on. From slavery to redlining and Jim Crow to the current gentrification that's taken place in lots of neighborhoods. In 1980, there were 100,000 Black people in Pittsburgh. In 1980, there were 80,000 Black people in Allegheny County, not including Pittsburgh. 100,000 in Pittsburgh, 80,000 in Allegheny County. Today, there's 67,000 Black people in Pittsburgh, and there's 114,000 Black people in Allegheny County, not including Pittsburgh. The situation has flipped for Black people in this region. Most Black people now live in the county, not including Pittsburgh. So we have to take that into account as we develop new policies. They need to be countywide. Thank you.
All right, is this on? All right, perfect. All right, thank you again, Mr. Redwood. And can we just give another round of applause to all of our panelists? And so we're going to start off. We're going to be in the Q&A section now. So I have a few individual questions for each of you. Then we're going to open up to some general questions that any of you can answer. So I think everyone can grab their mic. And then after that, we'll open it up to the floor in case anyone in the audience has any question for our panelists. And so our first question is for Dr. Young. Looking at Bethel AME and listening to Mr. Redwood, historically, what should community members be mindful of as they work to rebuild their communities and to reclaim their land?
Hello?
Oh,
There it is.
You're good.
Ownership. Ownership and the acquisition of power in order to maintain that ownership. And that really is in a lot of ways contingent upon being able to have a very robust organizations, you know, institution building, connectedness, and thought about more than just what's happening for my family, but recognizing that what's happening for your family is happening for hundreds of families in your neighborhood, in your county, and thousands and millions of families across the globe. And so that when I say that, that sounds big and like impossible. But the more that people network, the more that people can collectively hold power and land, the stronger that they can be.
thank you, thank you. And then this question is for Reverend Snyder. So listening to Mr. Redwood and Dr. Young's presentations, how is the fight for reparations being won meant to alter the history of how people approach the fight against urban renewal?
So across the country, there is reparations happening as we speak. I would encourage everyone to, especially those of African-American descent, to familiarize yourself with what's going on in California, what's happening in Peoria, Illinois. A lot of ecumenical bodies across the country has given back millions of dollars to historical Black churches, and a lot of universities and colleges are now giving free college tuition once they realize. And this is an activation of young white students who read the history. This is why you have trying to get rid of the critical race theory, is because they don't want their children to recognize what their forefathers have done to us as African Americans. So I would encourage, and I appreciate what both the panelists have brought to the table, but I'm a bootstrapper. You know, I believe in solving problems, and we have to train our children. We have to tell them the truth about America. We have to tell them the truth about racism, both white and Black. There's too ignorant people about racism and slavery. Most white people or Black people have no idea of the length of slavery, the degree and the severity of slavery. We didn't come here as slaves. We were stolen. We were we were artisans, we were craft persons. And then we were kept here against our will. So I believe the history and the truth, a young person such as yourself, I'm so glad to be here. And I'm so glad to see these young children here and us. Each one must teach one, each one must reach one. And we are stronger together than we are apart.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I want to connect to what Ms. Redwood said during the presentation, talking about the move towards housing vouchers and thinking about that connection towards an education with school choice, this like danger of the move towards privatization and what that's denying us, and especially talking about CRT.
Yeah, I would say that Cleveland has a model, that's my hometown, where they have, still have public housing that they renovated. Carl, I'm a union member too. I run dozers and backhoes and cranes. I finish concrete. I grew up in a construction business as a family. But it's a model that they have beautiful public housing. I agree with them. We need public housing for the working poor. I want you to understand, people who are making $18,000 or less are not on welfare. They're working poor families who go to work every day, sometimes working 60 and 80 hours a week trying to make a way for their families. And there is no upward mobility for them. So part of our collective effort in our development, and I want you to understand, Bethel CDC is 50% of the development team. We are now the developers. So we're making the decisions of how the lion's share of the profits can be spent. So I would encourage anyone that's doing development on any, you become the developer. Don't let the developer tell you don't have a right to be the developer. You have every right to split those profits and to say what happens in your development. Most of us have not had a seat at that table. So, and it goes back to what you're saying, education, opportunity for employment. So part of what we're going to ask the philanthropic community, Duquesne University, University of Pittsburgh, we have 4 years till we cut the ribbon. People walk in our building. For every resident we want to have a job for them. And we want to have a job readiness program for them. So we want to get them ahead of the game. So that way, if they go through this job training program we plan to put together, they'll be able to move up to work in a hospital. There's a model in Erie where I came from, where University of Pittsburgh, the hospital system is working with with Bishop Brock, and they take people right off the street, train them to work right in the hospital where they're making a living wage. So we got to find the models, as Carl said, that works. And then, I'm trying to help the babies. I'm trying to stop the bleeding. And I believe education is the key for success in America. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And then, Mr. Redwood, this last individual question is for you. But community participation is necessary, but sometimes ignored when it comes to fighting against development. What do you think communities need to know about community benefits agreements and inclusionary zoning?
Yeah, I just think it's very important that, and I think Reverend Snyder mentioned it, that we're at the table to fight. Because generally we come, like the Urban Redevelopment Authority and all the other official government bodies that provide big subsidies for developers, they like to have community meetings and invite us to the meeting. They bring food or whatever. And they check it off that they had the meeting.
Yep.
They don't write down what you said, or what you said is not binding, but they've satisfied their thing by making that check off. What we have to do is we have to develop these advanced thinking, visionary plans on where we want to be, like inclusionary zoning, like community land trust, like cooperative housing, that kind of go outside the box of what they're thinking downtown. But in order to have those become reality, we have to fight for them. Because if you do a community land trust, the developer can't make the same amount of money they make when they own the land and the house. If you do a cooperative development, the private owners, there's no private owners, you're the owner. So there's no private owner that can make money by flipping the property. But I think the hardest thing is for us as a community, we're not used to those things. we're actually not used to cooperation. I think it's down in here somewhere. But the way we've been raised, the competition just takes over all the time. And it's a constant battle. I think there's something religious in it too, right? But there's a constant battle inside of us to try to work together and do things together. But it's much easier to go alone or to flip things for profit instead of thinking like the reason for life is not wealth building. That's what they're teaching our kids now.
Yeah.
Wealth building is the thing. You want to be an entrepreneur, whatever. All that's all good, but that's not the reason for living or shouldn't be the reason for living. And we really have to have a different set of values, but I don't think I really answered your question, but I said, right.
Well, I do want to ask, kind of in following that, whenever communities do unite to hold these larger entities to account, what can an accountability structure look like that they can actually enforce to make sure that they're holding their word in terms of making?
One of the things is they promised Bethel some specific things. They've gotten things already. That's the other thing. They get theirs first and they promise us later. But you'll get yours later. And that we need to figure out a clawback mechanism. So if 4 years from now, everything's not in place to make sure that Bethel has what they need to move forward with the project, somebody else has to pay, and they're trying to set it up so it's going to all be on you and the development company. We need to figure out how to put other things in place that kind of guarantee what they say is going to happen will happen. Because even when they were doing it themselves, they went back on their agreements and they were supposed to give up 10% of the land every couple of years if they didn't develop it. That was the original agreement, but that never happened. They didn't develop nothing, but there was no real penalty, not a sufficient penalty to get them to honor their commitment, because that's what we wanted. If they didn't develop it, it should have came back to the community in phases, and we would have the whole, what they call it, the 28 acres. We would have the whole lower hill because they stalled so long collecting that parking money. They got $14,000 a day parking cars. So that's why they stalled. That was good money coming to them. But clawback is one thing. Like when you make a deal, you got to have a clawback. You got to be able to monitor it. We weren't sophisticated as we could have been in terms of monitoring and enforcement in the original CBA. But that's really an important part, is the monitoring and enforcement needs to be tight.
So I want to add that oftentimes, you know, I've been doing this work, I'm 64. Oftentimes, Black communities, when they organize, they don't bring experts in. So you have community people sitting across attorneys, architects, engineers, consultants, who, as Carl said, check it off on the box. What we've done at Bethel is we collaborated and built people from different churches, different faiths, got expertise. When we first started, we couldn't even get an attorney in Pittsburgh to represent us, to negotiate with the Penguins. So I had to go outside of Pittsburgh to get an attorney to represent us. And still to this day, because of the white supremacy, and no one wanted to be the first ones to go over and help the Negroes. Let me put it that way. So don't think that we got to where we got. My allies were able to go in the rooms and say, no, you're gonna make this right. And what we need is allies who come to the table and say, listen, when we had a meeting with the former mayor, what I do, we take minutes at every one of our meetings. Then we go to the next meeting, you said you're gonna do this, that, and the other. Well, why did that happen? Da, 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 da. They said, outside. I'm a outside of me. This is your word. You're gonna keep your word to me. And they said, well, you know, we're moving at rocket speed. You all be satisfied. I said, no, I'm not satisfied. I'm a disruptor. So when I get in, I'm 64. I ain't got time to wait another 64 years. No, we got to move. This is a right now thing. So you know, they say, well, I say, first of all, my church paid my salary, so you can't shut me up. You follow what I'm saying? So we need disruptors, and we need the church to be the church. We need the church to come out of their silos. And I ain't beating up. I got some allies. They know I have my daughters and my sons, because I'm old now. I accept, you can't do something on top of my head and tell me it's raining. And when I walk in certain rooms, I just can't walk in. Because if it's a bunch of BS, then I'm not going in the room because I pray all the time and God don't let this cussing spirit come out. Because some of the stuff they expect us to set, you just need to, what you think, I'm just stupid? So I organize and we try to get the experts. We got the University of Pittsburgh with us, the law department at Duquesne University work with us. We try to get the best and the brightest minds so that when we go in the room, this is what the law says. This is what the regulation says. This is what we need to be changed. And then what I want you to do is go back in and figure it out, come back and tell us how we can do it. So we collaborated. I had the pipe down because, certain rooms I can't go in. So I send my daughter in because she knows how to be a diplomat. I'm like, geez, I want to turn over the tables and, and so I had to learn how to have sent some of my pastors. I said, Pastor Carmichael in, man, you just cannot be mad at Pastor Carmichael. I don't care what it is. He just has this calming spirit and so I brought in the color change and I brought in Black Voters Matter. And, I brought in Carl and I got Lottie and everybody who said they want to do something about solving Black problems. And that's what we got to do. The church, white and Black churches, we got to come out of our silos and show our love because our churches are empty because our children see our hypocrisy.
Mm-hmm.
And if we want our children to come back to our churches, we're going to have to show our children we love who they love. They got Black friends that they love. They got white friends they love. They're marrying white children, marrying Black children, Hispanic children. They love where they love that. And until the church can show that we're going to fight against white supremacy, our children don't see us as a bunch of hypocrites, Black and white. So I'm just giving you 100% truth because the church is a place where people are supposed to come to find salvation. Not just talking about going to heaven, but how we're going to bring heaven down here on earth. So, Carl, what we do is organize. And if you got a solution, my door is open. You can find Bethel, you can find us, and you got some solutions. Let's find some solutions because I believe America is one of the best places in the world to live. I joined the U.S. force. I've been all over, everywhere in the world, but I've been a lot of places. Let me tell you something. This is one of the best countries to live in. And if you don't believe it, after you go to your island or wherever you go, leave the island, rent a car. Go 2 blocks away from that place where they serving you caviar and giving you a back rub and see how the natives live. Oh. And then you'll come back here in America and you say, we need to go to work because we have a great opportunity. I think we ought to take advantage of the opportunity. Education is the barrier breaker for poverty. The reason our people are trapped in poverty because we have schools that are failing to educate our children. And if you look at what happened during the pandemic, businesses have jobs that they cannot find individuals to hire, both Black and white. So don't think that education is terrible just in the Black community. I don't know where we at as it rates within the world, but American education, because of racism and discrimination and sexism, because we don't want to tell the truth, we have uneducated our children and we're falling behind the curve. So I believe the way we solve these problems, grab these babies, tell them who they are, teach them how to read and to write and to do what they taught me back in the old days, reading, writing, and arithmetic. How many of y'all remember that? Anybody remember reading, writing? I don't know where they got the arithmetic from, but education is key. So anyone who wants to partner with us to help solve problems, and I know it's a monumental task, but let's do what we can do while the blood is yet running warm in our veins. And I'll be quiet because I don't.
All right, Reverend with the sermon. And I always love that. It always made me chuckle because I know they're trying to get mathematics in there in a way that writing arithmetic.
Yeah, arithmetic.
Like trying to make it memorable, but
we need STEM math. Yeah.
All right, and so now I'm going to have some questions that any of you can answer. And at this time, if anyone wants to prepare some questions, I think, do we have a mic set up in case people wanted to? All right, perfect. So yeah, in the next few minutes, we're going to open it up to the floor. But one question, I know Reverend Snyder, you talked about this a little bit during your presentation and also here. what do foundations and universities owe to the Black people of this region?
Okay,
And I would like for both Dr. Young and Mr. Redwood to also join in on that answer.
Each one of the campus, the Kane University, University of Pittsburgh, Carlos University, all of them expanded their campuses after they took the 95 acres of land. So they benefited from the land being cheap. The F&B tower that they're building, they got 2.5 acres of land for $10. That was one of our strongest arguments. That if you can give the developers who built F&B Bank, the tower that Carl talks about going up, you gave them that land for $10. Certainly, you can give us our land back for $10. So that was our strongest argument. And the Penguins didn't actually own the land. They just owned the development rights. The URA owned the land. The Sports Authority have this Me Too agreement where all three of them have to agree on what is called a takedown of the land. But every time the Penguins have not delivered all the promises been to the community, the city has extended their development rights on the property. Well, there's a new sheriff in town now. They don't do what they're supposed to do. I'm gonna be on TV, on radio, in a moped, whatever. Look, no more extensions if they don't do what they said they're gonna do. It's difficult now, now that I'm on the development side, because there is financial tax credits and 4%, 9% that are supposed to work for poor people. But again, it's rich people talking to rich people, talking to rich people about poor people, and poor people that are not at the table. So we're trying to get poor folks at the table talking about our tax dollars. So what they owe us, if we pay 5% of the taxes in the city of Pittsburgh and Allegheny County, we deserve 5% return on our investment. We're not even getting a return on the city tax dollars we pay, the county tax dollars we pay, the state tax dollars we pay, the federal tax dollars we pay. If you look at all the monies that's spent on those levels, we're not getting a return in terms of contract services, investment, research. We're not asking you to give us something because we're Black. We're just saying, give us a return on our investment. Is it fair that white people get 99.9% of all federal contracts, city contracts, state contracts? That's what contributes to the poverty, because we can't go into the businesses that we need to develop and sustain our community because of these barriers that are in place. So that's why we deserve reparations, because we built this country for free labor for a very long period of time. And it's time for this country to stand up and do what you've done for the Jewish community. They got reparations. Do what you've done for the Asian community. They got reparations. Do what you've done for other communities, have gotten reparations from this government. We just ask the United States to stand up to your creed and do what's right. That's all, do what's fair.
Yeah, the Penguins in downtown have taken over the Hill District from the west. The University of Pittsburgh has taken over the Hill District from the east. There used to be a public housing neighborhood called Robinson Court.
Yeah.
Right now, it's 3 sports fields. And that section of Robinson Street, they renamed Champions Drive. Breckenridge Street, like I live right there, so up this way, there's one part of Breckenridge Street. Down this way, there's another part of Breckenridge Street, but Pitt's in the middle, so you can't drive down Breckenridge no more. It's split by the University of Pittsburgh. But this expansion, particularly of universities, and this is really important for us in Pittsburgh, the total population of Pittsburgh is 300,000. The bigger region of Pittsburgh has 80,000 college students. So just think of those numbers. Much of the development that takes place in Pittsburgh today is the market is college students.
Yeah.
Really, in terms of the lower hill, so developers in the lower hill want to compete with Southside and Lawrenceville for that nighttime college business. That's really what the development thing is about. You're gonna have college students all around the new housing development we're gonna build.
Yeah.
And the college students are gonna be everywhere around there because that's where the money is. And that's not because college students are rich. It's because college students got loans.
Mhm.
A lot of college students are still paying their rent from when they were in Pittsburgh 15 years from now. And we really have to understand the market and how it works and how this marketing works. But the University of Pittsburgh has taken over a part of our community. Duquesne has a little bit, but they really haven't moved as far, but they're building pretty robustly now in the uptown section of the Hill District or, but they haven't encroached as much.
I would say, sorry, turn my mic off. I would say, in part because I am an academic, I do work for a university, but our neighborhoods are laboratories, honestly. CMU comes to the Hill for the laboratory opportunity. Pitt does, CMU does, Duquesne does. There is a world of education that happens from hands-on application of theories and concepts that are taught in class. And if there was a price to be paid for those laboratory learning experiences, they would be very expensive. So universities owe a lot to our neighborhoods. Academics such as myself, honestly, I could say my academic career has been built on writing about the neighborhood that I was born and raised in, right? I don't feel bad about that because I feel like I've given back as much as I've taken, but I really feel like it's important that scholars that write about poverty, that write about Black experience, that write about economic exploitation or all those other things, actually give back to the neighborhoods that are their laboratory experiences. Many, many years ago, the University of Pittsburgh School of Social Work had a program wherein community organizers, Mr. Edward would know this better than myself, but because I had just come back to Pittsburgh at the time that this program was in place, but they had a program where community organizers could come to Pitt, take classes and actually earn a degree. So those are the kind of things that universities need to figure out, like how do you make sure to benefit the people in the immediate environment around the community rather than seeing communities as opportunities for housing. They also owe it to our communities to help to try to improve the neighborhoods rather than, in some cases, I know this at the University of Pittsburgh because I had a house that I was trying to rent at one point, and students who would come to see the house said that they were actively discouraged from living in the Hill District, right? Basically, if you come to the Hill, you're gonna lose a toe, a leg, or your car will be gone in the morning, whatever, right? But rather than discouraging their students, of course, because they'll put it in the guise of safety, even though I don't know how safe Southside is, but they put it in the guise of safety, but discouraging people from living in our neighborhoods as opposed to having an attitude of trying to help invest. There was an idea that Reverend, oh my gosh, goodness, I'm gonna miss his name. Reverend Cash. Had of, there's a geothermal corridor, mine water was captured, so on and so forth in this area. It can provide natural heating on Heron Avenue. And he had the vision to take the church, which was basically kind of falling apart and continues to fall apart, invite the University of Pittsburgh to build some student housing and co-locate senior housing and housing for people with ability challenges in that same area. So those students could have those physical therapy, learning opportunities, medical opportunities, social work opportunities, and also be living in a place where they could do, their presence can impact the community, and they can also benefit from the community as well. Kind of like almost like an old settlement house model for those who know what that was about, but basically where students come and actually give back to the community in a meaningful way that actually really will advance their skill. So I think that that's something that universities need to do more creative work on.
Yeah, whenever you bring up University of Pittsburgh actively discouraging people from moving to the Hill, it makes me think of that map from CMU where they said, oh, these are the places in Pittsburgh to visit, and they And still, they will say that it wasn't intentional, but all of like historically Black neighborhoods in Pittsburgh were left out of that map. They were just blank white zones where they named other neighborhoods around Pittsburgh. So that's a really important thing to bring up. And so I want to say, in the interest of time, we're not going to be able to get to everyone's questions, but if anyone in the audience has a question, please raise your hand and we'll bring the mic over to you. Right, I think the first person was here in the front.
Hi, first of all, thank you. A lot of information that I thought I knew was even more creatively outlined to me, and I appreciate that. My name is Renee Aldridge, Hill District member, and lifelong Pittsburgher. I wanted to direct a question to Pastor Snyder, if I could. You had stated that previously that two things, that no lawyer in this city would come and help you. You had to go outside to get attorneys to help you guys move forward. And you also stated that you guys had hired or tried to bring together a couple of grant writing organizations, and they said that they just didn't have the capacity. Regarding the second question about the grant writers, with everything that you guys, and forgive me for saying you guys.
That's no worries.
With everything, the advancements you made, the agreements from the Penguins, the vision of that, that was a little confusing to me. If you were able to articulate a little bit on that. Grant writing, you know, people are doing it all the time, from the small to the major. And the other thing about the attorney, do you have any thoughts, or did the various attorneys that you tried to get, did they say why they wouldn't take the case? And was it because in the ones that came from out of state, is it because they didn't have a knowledge of the Penguins and the vast size of that corporation? I was just, those two things.
So the first one on the attorneys, the ones that we contacted here all said they had conflicts of interest. So anytime you vet an attorney, the first thing they're supposed to do before they even take information from you is to see if they have conflicting relationship with the party you are negotiating with. And so that was their number one excuse. And those who didn't have a conflict of interest wanted to do business with the Penguins and therefore didn't want to partner with us. So we had to find an out-of-town attorney to represent us. And we still have out-of-town attorneys, and we now have a local attorney who now doesn't have a conflict now that we got to development rights. Which I'm not really happy with, but you need local people to help mitigate through this. Pittsburgh, for Black people, have been called Mississippi. They say from, how do you say that, Reverend? Up south. White supremacy is real. It is prevalent. And you would think with all the wins we had, I'm a business, I've never heard nobody say, I'm too busy to take more business. So, this is what we got from 4 prominent grant writing consultants recommended to us from the Penguins. So, because they're afraid of the powers that be. So we haven't got an audience with none of the foundations yet. So we're going to the library tomorrow. Me, Reverend Harris, and my other associate, we're going to the library tomorrow to figure out where the grants are so we can start doing the applications, finding out when the dates are. And so our developer that he's from out of town. We got an out-of-town developer. We got an out-of-town architect. Because the whole time we were pulling this thing together, nobody thought we was going to win. So, you know, I said, come to the table. Oh, no, they didn't want to be, they didn't even want to be associated with us. And then when we got the ring, got the win, one architect came to me who came to a funeral of one of my best friends who I won't even say his name, but I had to eulogize him. I hadn't seen the man in almost 2 years. And he said to me, you know, I thought I was gonna be the architect on the project. I'm like, wait. We've been organizing every Thursday. So it's the power structure, not just the penguins, but it's above the penguins. It's these families. Many of you don't know that originally they were going to take Highland Park before they took the Lower Hill. That was the original plan where the Civic Arena was supposed to go. But some of the rich families got together and said, you're not going to Highland Park. Yeah, that's my neighborhood. You go down there with them, you know what they said. And so that's the second thing. So now we are still looking. We probably going to have to go nationally. But if you know of some people who can help us build our capacity, because we need experts at the table and they need to be paid. We don't need to volunteer. They need to have a salary. They need to have health care. I'm going to ask you to help poor people and you poor. You know, you worry about your light bill, gas bill, phone bill, and then we expect you to give us your 100%. So we need help at the table. Now, I believe it's coming because I'm just that kind of person, that kind of faith. But I'm putting it out there. So we need help. And I'm not blaming the foundations, but we don't know how to get to you. So we need help to get to them. Because if I've been here 10 years, I would know Lottie Dottie and everybody. I don't know them yet. Okay, thank you.
All right, and I'm gonna first greet our virtual audience. Thank you again for joining us online. There was a question that we got virtually. Is there a way to reconcile the good memories, quote unquote, good memories, and stories about the Civic Arena online and how people were fond of it and wanted to preserve it as a historic, landmark with education about the way the land was taken for the greater good, but wasn't good for any of the previous residents or businesses? So is there a way that we can reconcile the Civic Arena's good memories with its impact?
There's a way. And I'm going to say this because when we were doing the CBA, the Community Benefits Agreement, there were a lot of young preservationists who came to the table. There's a way to do it, but it's almost why. Yeah. For us, why? That's work for other people to do that have that dual memory. People in the neighborhood, Miss Renee's mother, for example, had a business that was one of the ones that was displaced. For people in our neighborhood, there's a one-sided memory. There is no beauty, right? I remember, when I was a kid, I wasn't even there. I was born in 1968, but I went, they filmed a film called A Fish Named Wanda in Pittsburgh. And I got invited to come down to be an extra. That happened at the Civic Arena. Other than that, I went to the circus there a couple of times, but I don't have, and I wasn't a part of the displacement. We don't necessarily have good memories. And I can tell you during the CBA fight, the vitriol that came from particularly the white sports loving community, we were like monkeys and apes and all. It was like stuff. I was like, whoa, really? I didn't even know that kind of language existed anymore, right? And so, yes, but why is that necessary for us? I think that's necessary for people who had that dual experience, and not many of us had that.
Right, and I think in the interest of time, we're gonna do one more question from our in-person audience. Anyone have a question here?
About 1.5 questions. Quickly.
Sure.
Talked about the eminent domain with the church, the Bethel Church, which preface always. I started doing genealogy on our family going to the coast and found that, they had come in the 1890s and everybody lived in it. So being studious, I just started looking at the history of Pittsburgh. I've studied old maps and old pictures. In fact, looked at pictures this week before I came here. There was also a synagogue at this point. Well, there were many synagogues. There was one large on the left. Then I asked the folks that it's known as third generation. Weren't you politically politically connected to save these structures? So my question is, did you ever compare what the Jewish synagogue got in eminent domain versus the Bethel Church?
Question. Yeah, we had University of Pittsburgh do a study. And they got more per square foot than Bethel did. So that, that's why I showed that, they got whatever their appraised value was, they got the appraised. Yeah, so we got $500,000 less than our appraised value.
The question really is to Dr. Young.
Mhm.
If you were to back up into the fifties, and I just looked on, by the way, why did the Catholic Church survive? I just looked it up. It's because David Lawrence was Catholic, I think.
Exactly.
Just looked it up.
Yep.
So in the fifties, because in my family, I'll say my grandfather, I think it was my uncle, one of his stores was displaced on Fifth Avenue. Looking at the pictures, I mean, Wiley Avenue, Fifth Avenue ran right into the city with business, apartments above the business, people lived there.
Mhm.
So the first urban redevelopment was in Gateway Center. And to me, that makes sense because the old pictures, that was all industry, heavy industry, making steel or something, so they put up nice buildings. But as I looked at the lower hill, business, residents, and I may know the answer, but I'm curious what you say. And this happened everywhere in the country. But what was the decision process in the Pittsburgh area to pick that? Because there's already somebody there. What is your opinion?
Well, there actually is a statement online somewhere, I forget exactly where it is, by David Lawrence, the mayor at that time. And when I went over the gradation that happened, that was, in the different colors, remember that the key decision point was the presence of Negroes, undesirables, and undesirables included people who were not Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, Jewish, so on and so forth. And so, I'm saying, say your question again, because I got lost in it.
The decision process itself, was there no one politically connected, whether they were black folks or.
So I'm gonna help you.
But the mayor decided, his statement says, I want that gone.
Okay,
Exactly.
so-
And it was gone because the people that lived there were not desirable to him. And that's his own statement. You can read it. It's online. I forget exactly where it's at. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you already had 3 people working in that department at that time.
That's why I get when I ask
So,
people that.
right, so yeah, it's three people. If you go down there now, they have a whole office built, but it was 3 people. So the powers that be at that time, decided that that was gonna be the place, and the titans of industries, made those decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was an article by Gil Evans, who was a city council person in the 1940s. And the title of it was a post-war job for Pittsburgh,
Yes.
getting rid of the Hill District. And the original thing was to get rid of the Hill District from downtown all the way up to Heron Avenue. That was the original plan. And this was 48 or so. So it took them a while before they assembled the plan because they didn't start demolishing stuff till 57.
Yeah.
So between 57 and 62 is when the stuff was taken down. But and for the Black community, the other thing that's important, and by 1950, the population in the Lower Hill had become majority African.
Right.
So prior to that, like all of us were there, all nationalities, lots of different people. But by 1950, the population shift had changed where it became majority African.
All right. So unfortunately, for time reasons, we have to cut it off there, but I just want to thank you again, our esteemed panelists. If we can give them another round of applause. Thank you all for coming out, for attending this talk of the Negro Motorist Green Book Public Program, the Crossroads of World Impact of Urban Renewal. Thank you to Dania Childress, for all of your hard work and putting this together. Thank you so much. We hope you have not only learned about this history of urban renewal and how it impacts so many of us to this day, but also how to get involved and to continue to make a difference. Thank you so much for allowing me to serve as your moderator. This was an honor. I really appreciate it. And now I'm going to turn it back over to the Director of African American Program at Senator John Hines History Center, Director Samuel W. Black.
I think I had such a formal introduction. I would have been okay. As our moderator Jasmine said, thank you so much. This is one of the topics where we could be here for days because it's not a 2-hour discussion, conversation. Each one of these panelists brought something different to the discussion and left a whole lot more that they could have said behind. So we're gonna have to figure out how we can kind of repeat this again and continue the discussion because there's a whole lot more that we need to talk about. And it's not so much a nostalgic view of the Hill District. It is an examination of the current status of Pittsburgh, and especially people of African descent that was impacted from 1954 and then the destruction from 57 to 62. And all those things that are looked upon very brightly and positively as improvement in Pittsburgh, as Bonnie has said, was not improvement in terms of the 8,000 people who were displaced. And we can continue to see the same pattern repeated over and over and over again across this city. It might be very attractive architectural buildings and landscape and everything, but it impacts human beings. And I think that is what is being lost here. So again, on behalf of the Heinz History Center, our CEO and our Board of Trustees, staff, and volunteers, I thank you for joining us for this discussion, and we hope to do it again. Thank you.